Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott. You know him as B. Scott. Well, the Indianapolis Colts have reached their bye week, and it's time to assess the season so far. And today, first and foremost, we're going to get into some grades. We're going to grade the offense, the defense, Coach Steichen. We're going to grade anything and everything we can for the Indianapolis Colts. Give our midterm report card for the team. Kind of give our thoughts about how we think the season has gone so far for the different units on this Colts squad. We're going to look ahead at the second half of the season, giving our hot takes, players to watch, and predictions for a Colts squad that, you know what, we talked about wanting to see them be, be competitive at minimum, and they've been competitive at minimum. I mean, they're 5-5. They're in the mix for a playoff spot. I mean, this is best case scenario from what we could have thought at the beginning of the year.
I know this has been such a wild season for the Colts. Very up and down. Like, start off the season, okay, we got a loss here. Oh, then we beat Baltimore, and then you feel like the Colts are right there. You beat Tennessee, and you're just like, okay, maybe they have a chance to. Like, I even said it when we did after the first 2 weeks, we did a kind of like a, hey, how are things going? And I said, I feel like this team has a chance to finish second in the AFC South. And then Anthony Richardson goes down with an injury, and Gardner Minshew has a great game, and you're just like, this team's got something here. I think, okay. And then the wheels kind of come off, and then they win a couple, and it's just like, what a roller coaster ride of a season so far. But like 1 week you're feeling like, okay, just lose. We just need you to lose so we get a good draft pick. And then a couple weeks later, you're like, okay, maybe we can sneak into the playoff picture here. But they got you tuning in every week, regardless, wanting to tune in, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where because of what the fan base has been through the last couple of seasons, you don't really have super high expectations. So in years past, Colts being 5-5 and just outside of the playoff conversation, you'd kind of be a little angsty, a little disappointed, a little bit like, what can we do? You're talking yourself into the different scenarios of what you can do the rest of the season to try to get back in the playoff mix. Right now, you kind of feel like you're playing with house money with where you're at, and you're kind of like, okay, maybe, hey, look, if we can string some wins together, who knows? And if not, oh well, that's not where we're going to be anyway. So it's kind of a cool place to be if you're a Colts fan. Kind of on that, not really a spoiler, but kind of in that mode of like, hey, whatever happens.
It's a confusing place to be, because coming into this season, you knew you were still in rebuild mode,
right?
And knowing what was available potentially at the top of the draft, where you could potentially be picking, it's disappointing that you're kind of out of that picture now, because I think all the Colts fans were like, man, it would be awesome if we had an opportunity to land a Marvin Harrison Jr. Just sentimentality, not just sentimentality reasons, but also because, I mean, game changer at wide receiver. But now you're like, we're winning, we're close. We're really close to being in the playoffs, not quite there yet. And then you look at the back half of the schedule and you go, it's not great. So if you don't really know how to feel at this point, because like you said, the Colts are playing with house money right now. And if they keep winning and they're able to sneak in, that's great. And at the same time, if all of a sudden the bottom falls out as some of the games get tougher here, you also go, that's great as well, because it puts you in a good position. The one thing I do worry, though, for Colts fans is that there is going to be a what if we would have traded up in the draft, based off of with Anthony Richardson being out with an injury and really not having played a full game his entire rookie year. and then watching how CJ Stroud is doing down in Houston and has basically played his way into MVP talks.
Right.
So that I'm a little bit worried about that, how the future with Anthony Richardson goes, because there's going to be a lot of, well, you could have done this, but yeah, I don't know. It wasn't like we decided to pass up on CJ Stroud for Anthony Richardson. That's the nice thing. But especially when you see now that Will Levis he had a couple of good games for Tennessee, but you're always going to be kind of peeking over your shoulder at on the other side. How's the grass looking over there when your grass is struggling to stay healthy?
That's very true. Well, let's take a look back real quick before we get into some of the stuff, with how the Colts have looked so far on the season as a whole. Let's look back at this past week's game. The Colts took part in the Frankfurt games in Germany. They did face the New England Patriots. And looking back at this game, the scoring started in the first quarter. Chad Ryland for the Patriots connects on a 37-yard field goal. That opened the scoring. The Colts drove right down, answered the bell, and on a 4th and goal, Jonathan Taylor punches it in to put the Colts up 7-3. And then a punt fest broke out. Each team just could not do anything with the football. In the second quarter, Matt Gay comes up short on a 57-yard field goal at the end of the half. It was 7-3 Colts at intermission. In the third quarter, Minshew has a pass tipped and intercepted on the first drive of the half. The Pats missed the ensuing 35-yard field goal, so we're still deadlocked there. We're still, at that crazy 7-3 score. In the fourth quarter, Chad Ryland hits a 24-yard field goal with 12:44 to play to cut the lead to 7-6 Colts. But the Colts respond with a field goal of their own. Matt Gay connecting from 51 yards out. With just over 4 minutes to play, Indy picks off Mac Jones in the red zone. And then the Patriots get the ball with under 2 minutes to play. They put in Bailey Zappi as the quarterback. But with 31 seconds left, Zappi tries a fake spike, ends up throwing a pick to Rodney Thomas. The Colts win 10-6 in Germany. Gardner Minshew was 18 of 28 for 194 yards and an interception. Jonathan Taylor carried the ball 23 times for 69 yards and a touchdown. Michael Pittman had 8 catches for 84 yards. Zaire Franklin had 15 tackles, 12 of which were solo, and Dio Odegbo had 3 sacks. Reaction to this game, real quick, before we get into our first half grades. I did expect more. Kind of a dud of a game, but a win is a win. I won't lie. I put a parlay on this game. There were some things that DraftKings had out there, not an ad, that I was really kind of like was really tantalizing. It was like, I think like Gardner Minshew like 225 plus yards, the Colts to score like 24 points. And win the game and all this stuff. And I was like, you know what? Against the Patriots, the way the Patriots have looked this year, and I was like, hey, look, this could be, kind of a statement game. I guess not a statement game because the Patriots are awful, but this could be kind of like the only like game where the Colts are the only team on the stage, because it's not really a primetime game, but the only game where the Colts are the only team on the national stage at that point. This could be kind of their like, hey, we're kind of a, just kind of their kind of coming out party to kind of say, hey, we're here too. We can kind of do some damage too. And I wanted them to have more of a game than what they did offensively, especially after last year. I mean, last year's Patriots-Colts game, the Colts had that historically bad outing offensively with Sam Ehlinger. So I was hoping that they would do a little bit more offensively, but going into the season, thought this game was going to be a loss. I mean, it was the international game, Belichick versus a rookie quarterback, because we thought Richardson was going to be the quarterback going into this game. Patriots were the 8th best team in total defense a year ago, so I'll take the W, especially now that the Colts are back at 500. So it wasn't the prettiest win, but it was a win nonetheless.
Yeah, it. I will say, well, one, you had a lot of faith in the team. My brother-in-law took a bunch of the lower end bets on the parlay and lost because the Colts failed to score 12 points. So Yeah. Um, it was a game that, yeah, a win is a win, but it did not instill much faith in you of when you look at the rest of the schedule and seeing where, oh yeah, like took care of business against the Patriots. Patriots are near the bottom of the league. All right, good. We did what we had to do. We put our foot down and didn't step off the gas until the very end. Well, yeah, kind of a dud of a game. Doesn't really instill too much faith in you as a fan going forward the rest of this season. But I'm at the same time, I'm not too surprised. These international games like this always end up kind of being duds. Not all of them, but I mean, Kansas City, Miami was a decent game, but it's you're in a routine and then all of a sudden, bam, your routine is shaken up. Not only shaken up, but all of a sudden you're in a different time zone. Like you're dealing with jet lag and all this stuff. And honestly, I don't know what happened because the Colts come out, they look really good, just pounding the ball with Jonathan Taylor, and just ended up with a total of 69 rushing yards. I mean, just keep up doing what you were doing in that first drive, and you should easily get over 100 yards rushing. But I don't know. A W is a W, but I guess if you're not going to perform that well against one of the worst teams in the league, it's almost kind of like, I kind of wish we would have taken the L there when it comes to draft status. Because like I said, this team is still in rebuild mode. Don't think otherwise. There's still pieces they need to get themselves to be a legitimate playoff contender. And yeah, this win feels good because it's against the Patriots, but let's just be honest, that rivalry is dead. That rivalry ended when Tom Brady and Peyton Manning both ended up on different teams. So I don't know. Wasn't thrilled with the win.
I'll say, regardless, I know that like it's not as fierce as it once was, but I'll say it still feels good as a Colts fan to beat Bill Belichick. We'll say that. Like it still I mean, it may not be like it's not Michigan beating Ohio State. It's not Purdue beating IU. But it still feels good to win that.
Yeah, but
game.
I don't know. This one felt different. This one kind of felt like kicking an old man when he's down. To be honest. And then the news breaks that Bill Belichick and the Patriots are most likely going to mutually part ways at the end of the season. So it's just kind of like, whatever. Yeah. I don't know. I there's other games on the schedule moving forward that I'm more excited. I was more excited to see this year than that one.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying it was a marquee matchup. I'm just saying it still feels good as a Colts fan. Like went through that stage in the early 2000s with that rivalry. It still feels good to see them win that game.
Yeah. I mean, I was there 2 years ago. I was in the stands around Christmas time.
Right.
When the Colts beat the Patriots on a Saturday night, I believe.
Yeah.
And that was the one where Jonathan Taylor broke off some huge runs, and it was, I mean, that was a crazy environment to be in. But I don't know. This one just felt like the rivalry's long gone and dead.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what we're going to do tonight, first and foremost, is we're going to give out some first half grades. We're going to give our grade for, we're going to start with Coach Steichen for the Colts. Then we're going to give a grade for Anthony Richardson. Then we're going to get into the offense, the defense, and then give our final grade for the team as a whole. So, first and foremost, for Coach Shane Steichen, I'm going to give Coach Steichen a B. I'll get into it a little bit more in depth when we discuss Richardson and the offense, but those were the biggest question marks going into the year. How will the offense look, and how will Anthony Richardson look? The offense is looking the best it's looked since the last time they were in the postseason, and Richardson, when healthy, was looking like the solution at quarterback. So those were kind of the two biggest kind of breaths of fresh air, the biggest sighs of relief you could take as Colts fans. Were like, hey, the offense looks good, and Anthony Richardson, when he was in those first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, you're like, okay, I feel really good about picking Anthony Richardson. We were all talked about like, oh, he's a really raw talent. How is he going to look? Yeah, the comparisons are Cam Newton and Jalen Hurts, but how real really are those comparisons? We want to see him actually get on the field, and he looked like he was the real deal for those first 4 games. And then he got hurt. So, those were kind of questions answered, at least for now. They're 500 with some big wins, and you could talk yourself into Indy winning more games than you could losing the rest of the way. Like, you can talk yourself into, hey, they can win here, they can win there, and we'll get to that part of it a little bit later as well. But I think overall, I gave Coach Steichen and when we did this same kind of exercise after the first game of the season, and I gave them a B for that effort as well. Because I was like, hey, you didn't win, so it's not an A, but at the same time, still feel good about this team, still feel like you're competitive, and that is worthy of a B. It feels like a C is too harsh. And so that's kind of how I feel about them even still right now is, C still feels harsh because they're 500. C, it feels like you can't give them any worse than a C because C's average, and that's 5-5. So you can't do any worse than a C. 5-5 feels better than what we thought about this team going into the year. I know 6 wins was, I think, where I had this team finishing at, which is pretty awesome to think that they're almost at that point now. So yeah, I think B is where I want to go with Shane Steichen. He's done a really good job so far.
Yeah, I'm going to go with an A- for Shane Steichen. Mostly it's because of the cards he's been dealt, and to keep this team competitive and going out week after week after week and having them prepared. That's a huge thing, because there's been times in the past under previous coaches where the Colts have come out and just looked unprepared, and then there was no adjustments made at half, and they come out in the second half even more unprepared. He's got this team prepared week in and week out. Yeah, there was one clunker of a game against Jacksonville, but when was the last time the Colts actually played a competent game in Jacksonville? I just think it's the place.
They did kind of rally in that game too. I know they ended up losing by 17, but they did kind of rally and make that one a game for a second at least.
Yeah. The team's not giving up. He's got them playing hard. And then, when Anthony Richardson goes down with a season-ending injury, he could have just been like, all right, we're just going to play now for the future. Just, he could have folded up the for the rest of the season and just kind of gone into prevent any further injuries. But they came out with a plan. I mean, and I almost give him an A because of the fact that he has instilled 2 styles of offense into this team depending on who his quarterback is. So he's been prepared for all these different scenarios, whether it was Anthony Richardson playing at quarterback or whether it was Gardner Minshew at playing quarterback. That's not an easy thing to do, and he's had the team prepared for both situations. And I mean, obviously now you don't have to worry about preparing for Anthony Richardson as your quarterback right now, but that's impressive. I mean, and it just you see that he has a plan in place. He's not going out there and he's not reacting to full. I mean, you have to react to what's going on as a coach, but that's not just his game plan. Go out there and react as it happens. He comes in with a well-prepared game plan, and they execute on that game plan. Is it always perfect? No, but that's also where talent deficiencies lie. He's working to his players' strengths, which is great. And as a first-time head coach, the way he's handled himself this year, and especially coming in and how he handled himself throughout the Jonathan Taylor drama, and how I feel like he was kind of the one behind the scenes that was trying to right that ship. He is the kind of the guy stuck in the middle, to be honest. But got the team through that and got Jonathan Taylor folded right back into the mix easily. I think he's done. I mean, based off of the cards he's been dealt this year, I think he's done phenomenal. I give him an A minus.
Yeah, yeah, he's done a fantastic job.
I mean, I'm very hopeful for the future with Shane Steichen.
Right.
Very hopeful for the future. So part of his grade goes to looking towards the future as well.
Now, a big part of that future is going to be the quarterback, and Anthony Richardson. What kind of grade do we give him? I give him the official grade. I give him is an incomplete.
Yes,
and
that's what I'm feeling too.
Yeah,
is it incomplete?
I know, and I know that's kind of a cop out. But the only game he finished is the Rams game. That's the only game he finished all year. He missed the final 2 snaps of the opener. He got knocked out of the Texans game with a concussion. Then injured his shoulder in Tennessee, which knocked him out for the rest of the season. Now realistically though, if I were to give him an actual grade, not just incomplete, taking the 2 games in which he played the majority, he completed 56% of his passes for 423 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Through 10 games, that would put him at 2,115 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. C.J. Stroud, who has been looked at as the best rookie quarterback this season, his stats going into this past Sunday was 62% completions, 2,270 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 1 pick. So a healthy Richardson would put him on par with what has been the cream of the crop when it comes to this rookie class. What the cream of the crop of this rookie class has been. Plus what he's done in the other 2 games that he didn't play the majority of. So if he were healthy, and those were his numbers, it'd be an A. But I'll go, like, if I were to give him an official grade, I'll say B minus, just because he hasn't been healthy. He hasn't stayed. He didn't stay healthy. That was the big concern going in, and I get that we knew that was the concern going in. But still, I mean, it doesn't take away from the fact that, hey, that fear, that thing that we all kind of expected to happen still happened. Unofficial grade is B minus. Official grade is incomplete because he only played 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more I can add on to that. It's the truth about Anthony Richardson. There was concern of durability, the athleticism. He has shown it. He's shown that athleticism can translate into the NFL for him. He's an exciting player. I think that bodes well for the future as well. I mean, the good news is the Colts have a quarterback for the future if he's healthy. Going into next year, who the quarterback's going to be, which you can't say that has been the case. I don't know, for 7 seasons here. I think it is. We'll actually go into next season with the same game 1 starting quarterback that we did this year. And I think that's like the first time we've done that since Andrew Luck was the starting quarterback for the Colts. So that's good. But yeah, it's an incomplete just because there's 1 game completed, 1 full game. He looked good in that game. It's tough to look good in that game and the guy lining up on opposite you on defense is one of the best in the entire league in Aaron Donald. But yeah, I mean, I would go probably about a B minus, B as well. I'm not very good at math, so for you to put together those, what comparable numbers would be if he kept on the pace he was, that's good to know that he'd be right up there with C.J. Stroud. Yeah, that's exciting to see. So the potential, you see that the potential's there, and that's good. But
it's kind of yes and no, because it's like those numbers are based on the 2 games that he played that were healthy. If he then were healthy for the remaining, if he were healthy for all 10 games of the season, yeah. So he wasn't for those other 2. So it's kind of okay, well, he probably wouldn't be healthy to get to those numbers, even if he wasn't out for the season. So but yeah, you're right. It is good to know that those were the numbers he would be at, and he would be, because and he was electric through those first 4 games, or those first 5 games. He did miss 1 in there with the concussion too. The Baltimore game. So I mean, he looked amazing.
Was it Baltimore or was that?
It was Baltimore.
Texans?
It was Baltimore.
He
No, well, he got the concussion in the Texans game. He missed the
got
Baltimore
it.
game because of the
Oh,
concussion.
CJ Stroud miss the Texans game? Because we were all
No,
excited about that matchup, and then
no, he
we
played.
missed it.
He played. I think he might have gotten injured in the Texans game, but I don't think he missed it.
I thought he missed it because there was like, oh man, we were going to get to see this matchup, and now we don't. I don't know. I felt like there was a lot of hype, and then it was just kind of like everybody was like, I don't know. Like it's been a long season. I mean,
Yeah,
with the Jonathan Taylor drama, that felt like a whole season in itself.
right. Right. But yeah, no, he was electric in that Jacksonville game. Thought the Colts were going to win that one. He was awesome in that. Dude, hey, I would have won a parlay if he would have played that whole Houston game because he was already like got me like halfway to that parlay with just the first quarter that he played.
Yeah.
With how awesome he was doing there, and then of course gets injured against Tennessee, and then played the whole Rams game. So he was amazing in the games that he played. It's just a matter of staying healthy, and hopefully he can work on that and be better about staying healthy next season.
Well, and also that I think he'll have a better shot of staying healthy if the Colts make the right moves in the offseason through the draft, through free agency, through any trades potentially. Just to help him not have to extend a play with his legs constantly.
Right. So, moving on now to the offense. The grade we give the offense. So looking at some of the numbers from the past. In 2020, the Colts offense was 10th in total offense, 9th in scoring offense. They averaged 28 points per game. That was the last time they made the postseason. Since then, they were 16th in total offense, 9th in scoring offense, averaging 27 points per game in 2021. They were 27th in total offense, 30th in scoring offense last season, averaging 17 points per game. This season, they're 10th in total offense, 7th in scoring offense, and averaging 26 points per game in this season. So the numbers are back to where they were the last time the Colts were in the postseason, and going into this week, they were the only team to score at least 20 points in every game this season, and they're doing this all with their backup quarterback, and they did this mostly without Jonathan Taylor for the first half of the season. For the first quarter of the season, they didn't have Jonathan Taylor. So I'm giving this offense an A grade. And to say that with the backup quarterback, with the backup running back for the first quarter of the season is pretty remarkable. Like I said, I mean, the fact that they're, again, top 10 in total offense. They're top 10, knocking on the door of the top 5 in points, basically in points per game this season. Only team in the league averaging, 20 points per game. That was going into, of course, this week where they only scored 10. Doing it without Jonathan Taylor, doing it with Gardner Minshew, not Anthony Richardson. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. So this offense gets an A from me.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a B plus just because there have been a couple clunker games where turnovers have been an issue, or failure to score points this past weekend. But I can't take this past weekend too much into consideration. Like I said, jet lag and just throwing off the routine. That's real. So I'm not too concerned about that, but I'm going with a B plus, just because there are times where it's like the offense is rolling, and then they come out and just are flat. It's like, what? How? Okay. And then it gets rolling again. But when I look at the offense, there's big weaknesses still. Offensive line is getting better, but it's still a weakness. I'll tell you what, right now, the one room that needs an overhaul, is probably the deepest room of as far as like usable bodies. That's tight end. I mean, I know everybody's like, well, Brock Bowers. I'm like, no, he's not going to be available when we pick Cade Stover from Ohio State. He'll transform your tight end room, but that's another show. Yeah, I mean, the offense, it's doing really well. It's doing better than the eye test shows. But I'm going B plus, close, just missed out on an A minus, I would say, for me. But like the future is bright. Josh Downs, holy cow. has been a revelation, and I can't wait to see him grow. Jonathan Taylor, knowing you got him locked in longer, is going to be great. So, and having an offensive minded coach, a legit offensive minded coach, and Shane Steichen, he's actually showing it as well.
For sure. Looking at the defense, I'm giving the defense a C. They're 26. They're 26th in total defense this season. They're allowing 27 points per game, which is 29th in the league. Comparative to last season, they were 15th in total defense last season, 29th in points per game, allowing 25 points per contest. And I'm going C because of the regression in total defense. I'd expect the numbers to be a little bit better than last year, especially given how awful the offense was last season. I mean, that was an offense that turned the ball over at an excessive rate last season. And you kind of gave the defense a pass because of that, because you're like, okay, well, they're constantly on the field because Matt Ryan can't hold on to the football. Whereas this season, the turnovers haven't been quite as crazy, and yet the defense is still suffering because of that. So, or the defense still isn't, this defense is actually worse, technically, statistically, than last season. So that's a little alarming. There have been bright spots. You do have Zaire Franklin, who leads the league in tackles with 117. He had the two pick six game from Kenny Moore a couple of weeks ago against Carolina. So there have been some bright spots. Rodney Thomas continues to be a bright spot as well, having a pick in the last game against the Patriots. So there's a lot of things to like about the defense, but overall, I think I give them a C.
You know what? I actually give them a little bit more benefit of the doubt. I give them a B minus. Because there's been moments where it's just like, oh, come on, just like what? How do you give that up? But that secondary is depleted. It's so depleted. It was already a big glaring need coming into this season. And then when you lose some of your better talent and your rolling players out like Dallas Baker, who has honestly no business being on the field during defense, he's a special teams player through and through. It's, when you're relying on players like that to have to cover in your secondary, that's rough. But, Kenny Moore is back up to playing at the level we know Kenny Moore can play. Rodney Thomas, like you mentioned, has been a bright spot, just a solid, consistent player. There's questions like, why aren't we playing Nick Cross if everybody's been so high on him? But the defensive line, I think, has been outstanding this year. I read an article a Bleacher Report article where they had one player that needs to be traded from each team in the offseason. And they said for the Colts, it was DeForest Buckner, because when you look at the Colts defensive scheme, there's really no suitable place for him in it. And it's shown. I'm like, what games have they been watching? I feel like DeForest Buckner this year has defined himself as one of the top 3 or 4 interior defensive linemen in the NFL. He's been a disruptive force this year, getting to the quarterback, causing turnovers, pass breakups. I mean, he is constantly in on plays. And then you're starting to see more out of our defensive ends, which is good. The loss of Grover Stewart for a period for his suspension, that hurts. But they'll eventually get him back. For me, the biggest disappointment, though, on defense, the secondary is injury depleted, and it was already going to be a concern, so I can't say that's a disappointment. For me, the biggest disappointment is Shaq Leonard. Mm-hmm. I mean, he wants to complain and complain and complain that he's not getting the snaps and blah, blah, blah. But when he's out on the field, he's not the same leader he was. He's not the same player he was. It's like, can we get rid of Shaq Leonard and go back to Darius Leonard, please? Because Darius Leonard was a heck of a football player. Shaq Leonard is a shell of himself. In which I feel like that's why the Colts are playing more EJ Speed than they are Shaq Leonard. So that says something. So that's a huge, huge loss. When you look at the potential of when you're seeing what Zaire Franklin's being able to do this year, and what Darius Leonard, Shaq Leonard, whatever can do, you really want to. it could be something really special, but for some reason, it's just not clicking this year for him. And that's a major disappointment. If he was performing a little bit better, I could give this team more of a B, maybe a B, this unit I would say I can't go any higher than a B because of the secondary, but Shaq Leonard's been a major, major disappointment for me.
Yeah, that has been. He's not been contributing the way you'd like to see him contribute. That's for sure. Definitely a surprise because you were happy to see him back at the beginning of the year. Happy to see him. Have him at full speed for the first time in a while, and it's just not been.
I just feel like he's been more talk this year than production. Like he got that contract, he's proven his point, and now it's just kind of like he's there, but he still wants to talk the talk. It's like, but dude, you gotta walk it too. I mean, you want to play more snaps, but when you're not reliable right now, you can't be out there on third down. So it's disappointing.
So looking at the team as a whole, we're going to, the final part of this exercise is to give the team as a whole a grade. And so I'm going to give the Indianapolis Colts up to this point a B. Gave the offense an A, gave the defense a C, so it makes sense to go in the middle and give the team as a whole a B. We talked about wanting them to be at least competitive at the beginning of the year, and they've exceeded that. The Houston and Baltimore wins are looking better and better every week. I feel like we do this every year, but if we could go back and have the Rams game back or the Browns game back, you're right in the thick of things, playoff-wise, even more so than they are now. And considering the uncertainty at the beginning of the year with the JT situation, the fact that they had a new head coach, a rookie quarterback, I like where the Colts are right now. I mean, there was a lot of reason to be optimistic with the Colts at the beginning of the year, but there are also a lot of reasons to be like, hey, you know what? Yeah, there's there's some bright spots, there's some things to look forward to, and some things to kind of keep an eye on and be excited about. But there's also a lot of things to not be excited about. There's a lot of reasons to think this team. There's a lot of reasons to think that this team having 5 wins total would be a win, and to have that at the bye week is pretty remarkable. So I think B for this team is a really good mark. I like where this team's at, and I'm really optimistic about what this team can do the rest of the year and beyond.
Yeah, I totally agree on a B. This team has faced an injury bug, has faced drama, has overcome both for the most part, and has surprised a lot of people this year. I mean, a lot of people honestly had them pegged as one of the worst teams in the NFL, along with, they had the Colts and the Arizona Cardinals in the same conversation. And that spoke volumes. So now for this to be sitting here at 5-5, going into the bye week, and just on the outside of the playoffs looking in right now, it speaks a lot to this team's resilience, and it shows that they have the pieces in place going forward to be competitive, and that a few more plugins and this team could be knocking on the door of what we were seeing when Andrew Luck was playing really well. I still think we're a little bit off from the Peyton Manning days, but that's like a totally different level of play that you only see that out of maybe like 1 or 2 teams anymore these days. So, but the Colts they're heading in the right direction. I remember just about a year ago, we had a podcast of who has a brighter future, the Colts or the Pacers. And both of them at the time was just like, ugh. And I feel like now you can look at both of those teams and go, there is a clear path. There is a clear direction. These teams are both have an upward trajectory. They both have young stars. The city's still behind them, the fan bases at least. So yeah, future's bright. Give them a B for how they performed thus far.
So, we go from kind of looking at the season up to this point to now looking ahead. We're going to do some hot or cold questions. If you're tuning into the podcast for the first time, our hot or cold segment is where we give a take and say whether or not that take is a hot take or a cold take. And the first take is this: Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman will be Indy's leading rusher and receiver again this season. And for me, this is actually going to be a cold take. And the reason I say that, Zach Moss, currently the leading rusher with 617 yards. The week JT returned, Moss had 23 rushes for 165 yards and 2 touchdowns versus Tennessee. That was October 8th. Since then, he's had 44 rushes for 172 yards. He has still had a couple of touchdowns since then. Jonathan Taylor is up to 323 yards on 85 carries and is expected to be the number 1 back going forward. His usage has seen an uptick over the last 4 games, 71 rushes, 286 yards, compared to 14 carries for 37 yards his first 2 games back. At the current rate, Moss is projected to finish at 858 yards, whereas JT is expected to finish at 824. So that's why I think Moss. That's why I think Moss will get there. Now I will say. Now, I'll kind of finish it off at the end where I think, I might be wrong on this one, but I'm going to root for the story here. What Zach Moss has done this year has been awesome, so I'm going to give him the nod. I think he's going to outrun JT this year. Of course, he was spotted 5 games, but that's okay. I still think he's going to get there. Now, as far as Michael Pittman, he is the leading receiver with 677 yards. He's 154 yards ahead of Josh Downs, who's second. Now, that's a smaller gap than you'd think, since Pittman has been targeted nearly 40 more times and has 23 more catches. But over the last month or so, since Minshew has become the official QB1, Pittman has been targeted 52 times, Downs just 27 times. That's pretty alarming for me to think that if Downs has just a few, that's alarming enough for me to think that even if Downs is targeted, even if Downs has a few more bigger games, Pittman will still be the more consistent option for Minshew. He'll be the option for Minshew to go to more often. So I think Pittman will probably still end up as a leading receiver. But just because I like what Zach Moss has done this year, I'm going to predict that he's been spotted just enough of an advantage to end up the leading rusher at the end of the season. It will be close. Indy does play. Indy does play 3 games versus the bottom 8 rush defenses the rest of the way. So they do have some games where JT can break out and have like 120, 130 yards and really close that gap. So that's where I think I might be wrong, and JT will probably close that gap and end up winning out. But just by the numbers and crunching them the way I did, I was like, you know what, Zach Moss technically could end up being first, and so that's why I'm going with him. So I think that is a cold take. Zach Moss will be your leading rusher at the end of the year.
I'm going to say it's a hot take, especially after what we saw the usage this past week, so they usually put Colts Stats. There's a Twitter account that puts out typically snap counts, and if I remember correctly, Zach Moss only saw like 1 snap.
He had 1 carry for 2 yards. Yeah.
1 carry for 2 yards. So he probably saw more snaps, but 1 carry. That's going to be rough to maintain. I think it's going to be close. I really do. And you'll hear me here. I'll say why later with my hot take for the rest of the season. But ultimately, I do believe Jonathan Taylor ends up being the team's leading rusher, just because Jonathan Taylor has that big play threat, that big play ability to him. He can bust it open any given play. I mean, we have seen that out of Zach Moss as well this year, but Jonathan Taylor has a greater history of producing that type of play. And then Michael Pittman, I mean, he's the amount of times he's being targeted, he's going to maintain being the leading receiver as far as yardage goes. Josh Downs, I think, can keep it close because Josh Downs is that big play threat in the passing game. He's kind of the T.Y. Hilton type. So that keeps him in the conversation, but ultimately it's Michael Pittman that will be the leading receiver. And it'll be interesting because he's in a contract year, and he's kind of voiced his displeasure occasionally which is interesting. He voices his displeasure that he doesn't think he's part of the offense, but yet he's like the leading receiver. He's seeing the most targets and everything. But
right,
hey, coming off of a loss, that's loss speak.
Yeah, he's been targeted twice as much as Downs since Minshew has been the quarterback, but the second take in this exercise, the Colts will make the playoffs this season. According to Pro Football Talk, the Colts have the second easiest schedule the rest of the way. The article was released heading into Week 10. They have the Bucks at home after the bye week. Then they have the Titans. Then they go on the road against the Bengals. They're at home against the Steelers. They're at the Falcons. Then they're at Lucas Oil for the final 2 games against the Raiders and Texans. The Bucks are hard to gauge, but I think the Colts can win that one. They can beat the Titans and the Raiders. That gets them to 8.
I don't know about the Raiders.
Maybe. That gets them to 8 wins.
Raiders have got themselves that quarterback of the future.
With the Bengals, Steelers, and Texans all being toss-ups versus teams that are also jostling for playoff position. So let's say the Colts finish at 9-8. Let's say that's where they end up. Since the NFL went to 7 teams in playoffs, went to 7 teams per each conference. Here are the records of those 7 seeds. In 2010 or 2020, it was 11-5. That was the Colts. In 2021, it was 9-7-1. That was the Steelers because of the Colts, because they lost to Jacksonville in that last game. So it should have been 10-7, but it was 9-7-1. And in 2022, it was 9-8. That was the Dolphins. So it's entirely possible that the Colts can make the playoffs based on the records of the past 7 seeds. But I'm going to say this is a cold take. I'm going to be pessimistic. I can see, honestly, this is my prediction. I can see the Colts-Texans being for the 7th seed in Week 17. I can see that game being for the final seed in the AFC. And the way C.J. Stroud is playing right now, I give the edge to Houston. While considering that Colts-Texans in Week 17 last season was to decide draft position in the top 5, and this year could be for playoff position. But yeah, I think it's going to be tough. But I think the Colts could. I think it's very possible the Colts could finish 9-8. But I think it's just too big of a hill to climb and too many obstacles in front of them for them to make the postseason. I think they make it close. I think they make it interesting. But I'm going to be pessimistic. I don't think they get it done. I don't think they get in.
Yeah, I'm going to say this is a cold take just because some of those games that you look at, oh, yeah, the Colts can win that one. The Colts can win that one. You almost have to guarantee that one of those games, the Colts will drop one.
Probably the Raiders one.
Probably the Raiders, because the Raiders, after getting rid of Josh McDaniels, I know it's been the Giants and the Jets. I realize that. But they're playing with a different attitude. They're playing loose. They're playing happy. They're enjoying playing again.
It would be poetic, and for one, Aiden O'Connell. I know that's one part of it, but also it would be poetic justice for the Colts, because Colts last year had their former player head coach beat the Raiders. So now it's time for the Raiders. I mean, I know Antonio Pierce didn't play for the Raiders, but it's time for now the former player head coach for the Raiders to now beat the Colts.
Yeah, and the Colts just haven't had really great luck at Lucas Oil Stadium with the Raiders,
right?
As of late, either. So. I mean, watch the Colts. Maybe they beat the Raiders, but they lose to the Buccaneers. It's one of those, like, the Colts haven't shown consistently that they can win the games that they should win or can win. So I think it's a cold take because I feel like the Colts will drop one. And watch, it could be against a team like they could drop it to Atlanta, who is not very good right now either. And it's just like, I could see any of those happening, but then at the same time, I could see the Colts going and beating the Texans on that last game of the regular season. It's just you just don't know. I mean, there's so many ups and downs, but I think ultimately I have to go. It's a cold take just because there's too much of a chance there for the Colts to drop some games that they shouldn't.
Yeah, you're probably right there. And so the final hot or cold question is this. Or the final hot or cold take. The Colts should draft a quarterback again in 2024. And for me, this is a hot take. Anthony Richardson did a lot in his 4 games to show he is the answer, but also his injury and play style is a lot of cause for concern, which we knew going in. We talked about this before. We knew all this going into drafting him. Not only is he a project, but there's his play style is going to get him injured quite a bit. This is a very deep draft class, quarterback-wise, with a lot of great talent. I'd really love to see the Colts get Bo Nix or Quinn Ewers. They'll likely be off the board before the Colts, before the Colts should draft another quarterback. I'm not saying first round. I'm not saying the Colts should spend a first round draft pick on a quarterback. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they should just draft another quarterback in general because they should have someone younger behind. Not to say that Minshew hasn't done a great job, but they'll probably want to move on from Minshew at some point, and they should have another quarterback behind Richardson as an insurance plan. That's more or less what I'm saying. But the Colts shouldn't really consider it, in my opinion, until round 3. Obviously, they need to address other concerns first in those first few picks of the draft. But CBS Sports projects the likes of Michael Pratt out of Tulane, Riley Leonard from Duke in that third round range. Also, where they project South Carolina's Spencer Rattler, Florida State's Jordan Travis, make them attainable for the Colts to maybe get them in the third or fourth round. Those are guys that could potentially be not don't want them to be the quarterback one for the Colts, but wouldn't hurt to have them in the room as well. And so, the depth of this draft class and the potentially foretelling start to Richardson's tenure just makes me think that the Colts should kick the tires on potentially drafting a quarterback. Like I said, don't want them to do it like round 1 pick, wherever they're going to be. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is third round, fourth round, something to consider, considering Richardson's start to his tenure as a Colt.
You make a good argument there.
It's one of those things. It's one of those things where, if this weren't it's falling into place where if this were any other draft class, because it's kind of like if this draft class had come 1 year sooner, like the Colts would have been. I mean, not to say again happy with Richardson, but if this draft class would have come 1 year sooner, the Colts would have been made because there's so many.
May.
Yeah, there were so many great options. You've got Caleb Williams, you've got Drake May, you've got you've got Bo Nix, you've got Quinn Ewers, you've got Shedeur Sanders, you've got you got Michael Penix. You've got so many great options that you almost couldn't go wrong with who. I mean, there will be teams, I guarantee you, there will be teams that probably just took a quarterback last year that will take or just took a quarterback even 2 years ago that will be taking a quarterback this year because of how deep this quarterback class is.
Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, I mean, hey, yeah, and even that. I mean, look, they're a great example. They take. I'm not comparing this to Malik Willis and Will Levis, but they literally just did this. They took Malik Willis in 2021 and then take Will Levis in 2022. So I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you know what? If we're in a position to do, we're in position to get another quarterback, get another talent in the room. Why not do that? So it's not an. I mean, I know kind of the way you can spin it is not having faith in Anthony Richardson or whatever, but it's almost kind of like, hey, you know what? We're not going to have Gardner Minshew forever. Heck, Gardner Minshew, the way he's playing, could potentially play his way into being somewhere else as someone else's starter who misses out on one of these quarterbacks. So who knows how it's going to shake out, but I just think it's worth. I mean, I know, heck, I don't know. I mean, I know they, drafted Sam Ehlinger, and I know they, have some other options as well in that regard. But I just think it's something they should at least consider, with Richardson and his play style. That's just something that they should look at.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's going to show this year the importance of having a competent backup, a good option at backup. For me, though, I honestly, I'll say I don't know. Because contract years and everything, I don't know. Is Gardner Minshew under contract still next year for the Colts?
So I started to look that up. I want to say he is, maybe.
I think he is. I think he's got at least a 2 or maybe 3 year contract. Look, you've convinced me into a hot take here, mostly because the Colts have shown that they will carry 3 quarterbacks on the active roster. I think Sam Ehlinger's days are numbered. He's shown there's nothing there. However, I'm not looking at bringing a quarterback in this next draft to be the immediate backup to Anthony Richardson. Because the last thing you want is basically two rookie quarterbacks standing there trying to figure things out together. I like Gardner Minshew being in the position he's in, and getting knowing that Gardner Minshew is not going to be there full time or much longer, or if you, I don't know. I'm trying to say here is that the Colts are in a good position with having Gardner Minshew as their backup, but it is worth it to bring in somebody else that can be behind Minshew that can step in as a backup to Gardner Minshew in case Minshew gets pushed into the starter role again.
Well, and I mean, look, because any of the quarterbacks that you'd be looking at in the third or fourth round are not going to be starters for you anyway. So it's not like you're drafting. If you draft Spencer Rattler, you're not drafting him because you think he's going to be QB1.
But you're drafting him because if your starter goes down, he's a player that you feel like can fit into your system and be a competent backup. Because we have seen, as Colts fans, we have seen within this organization what happens when you do not have competent backup play at quarterback. The year Peyton injured his neck and we were running with Kerry Collins, Curtis Painter, and then it turned out that the third string quarterback was actually the one that probably could have won us more games and won us right out of getting Andrew Luck and Dan Orlovsky. So yeah, you've talked me into this being a hot take to have that guy, that third quarterback there, because if Anthony Richardson does go down again, that third quarterback then moves into the number 2 role and has to be ready to go at any given moment. Because I don't think right now the Colts fans or the organization can be all that. They should be worried that if Gardner Minshew were to go down with an injury, I don't think we're all that confident in Sam Ehlinger.
Yeah. So yeah, I think just having that insurance would go a long way, and drafting another young quarterback, can't hurt to do it. Just bring another guy in. So before we get out of here, we want to give a second half outlook, a player to watch, and then a bold prediction. My player to watch is Zaire Franklin. Mentioned earlier that he leads the league in tackles with 117. He also leads the league in solo tackles with 76 this year. If he can hold on to the lead in both those categories, he will be the first Colt to lead the league in both solo and total tackles since Shaq Leonard did it in 2018. He finished 4th in tackles in the NFL last year. And we said he had to step up even more this season with no Bobby Okereke, and he answered the bell. He's 50 tackles ahead of second place on the team, and second on the team is Kenny Moore, and he's got 50 more tackles than he does. So he's just been an absolute monster, and I think Franklin is set to finish the season strong. So he's going to be somebody to watch and keep an eye on. I love what he's doing, and I hope he has a great second half of the season. My bold prediction. And it's tough. I realize that kind of put us in a weird spot as far as bold prediction because we've already, talked about if the Colts can make the playoffs, and I've already kind of took one of my potentially bold predictions away by saying the Colts might draft a quarterback next year. So my bold prediction is that Gardner Minshew will surpass his career high for passing yards in a single season. As a rookie in 2019, we saw Minshew Mania account for 3,271 yards. It's his only season with 3,000 plus yards and his only season with more than 10 starts. This season in 6 starts, Minshew has thrown for 1,395 yards. That's 233 yards per game, meaning he's projected to throw for 1,628 yards the rest of the season. He's currently at 1,721 yards, and that means he would wind up at 3,349 yards. Maybe it's not the boldest of predictions, but shout out to Gardner Minshew, who's been the most reliable Colts quarterback we've seen for a minute. So he's had a great year. Hopefully he can finish the season strong and put up his best season statistically that he's had for his career.
My player to watch, I'm looking at Dayo Odengbo. He's come on strong here recently. I want to see if he can continue that. When the Colts drafted him, they looked at his versatility, his length, his athleticism. They took a flyer on him. He was injured, and it's starting to show now. And I want to continue to see that grow because, look, he's learning alongside a player in DeForest Buckner, and he's being disruptive like a DeForest Buckner, and I'm loving it. I almost went with DeForest Buckner because I want to see him continue to be a dominant force. But Odengbo is my player to watch. My bold prediction, stick with me here. I'm going to say the Colts have two 1,000-yard rushers. When you said it, we play 3 of the teams that we have left on the schedule are in the bottom of the NFL in rushing. And if, the Colts hitch their horse to that game plan, Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor have the potential to have very strong ends to their seasons. It's going to take a lot. It will take a lot, but I think the potential is there for both of these players to hit the 1,000-yard mark.
Hey, that's bolder than me.
It's got to be bold, right?
Yeah, no, that's that. I like where your head's at, because I was trying to think, because like I said when I brought it up, I was like, I kind of pigeonholed myself, because bold prediction, easy one would have been like, oh, I think they make the playoffs, but we already kind of answered that question. So where do I go from there? So I was like, okay, let's look at some statistical stuff. So I like where your head's at, and it's possible. I mean, Moss is right there at 600, so I mean, his usage would have to uptick, but I mean, it's not impossible. And then JT, I think he's going to have some big games as well. So it's definitely in the cards for sure. And I mean,
go big or go home, right?
Yeah. There's another possibility too. I can't remember the last time the Colts had 2 1,000-yard receivers, and that's a potential too. With
what about? I mean, we
Pittman
can have two 1,000-yard rushers and 1 1,000-yard receiver.
Yeah. Offense is looking bright. That's why I gave him an A, because it's looking better than it's had in a long time. Especially as far as like weapons go and all that kind of stuff. So,
I don't know. I still think the Colts are a few weapons away from being a strong offense.
Oh, for sure. But I mean,
my cart has been totally detached now from Alec Pierce. I don't think he's got much of a future. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I think he rides out his rookie contract and the Colts move on from him.
Yeah, I mean, he
hasn't even shown the flashes. He hasn't even shown flashes. That's the thing. He just kind of occasionally makes a good catch, but otherwise he disappears out there.
Yeah, I suppose. And Downs has been getting more like targets and stuff, so he's kind of faded into like the 3rd and 4th man realm. So yeah, it's tough, because I thought he looked pretty good to start, and then just kind of hasn't done much since. But it is what it is, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I do think the offense is definitely looking better than it has in a long time. So definitely look forward to what the Colts can do in the second half. But that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for hanging out with us. Remember, you can like us on Facebook, 3C Media. Go follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. I should probably change that to X, but I still haven't done that. So go follow us on X, I guess.
Still people call it on Twitter.
Right. Go subscribe to us on the YouTube channel if you're not over there already. If you're listening to us on the podcast app, go subscribe to us on YouTube. Ring that bell. Hit that subscribe button. Go follow us on TikTok, 3C Media. And remember, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. You can follow me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. B. Scott, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter or X at Brandon_Scott87.
Next week, it is time for the Indiana High School Football State Finals preview show. So we'll be getting into the weeds, into those 6 contests. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be breaking down those games. It'll, fun weekend of football at Lucas Oil Stadium here in a couple of weeks. But until then, have a good week, everybody.